The skies above Earth were no longer blue, but a dark, ominous haze that seemed to suffocate any hope that remained. The Zorathian ships, massive and terrifying, blocked out the sun as they hovered over cities once teeming with life. Their sleek black hulls glimmered with an unnatural sheen, reflecting the destruction below. Humanity's last-ditch efforts to defend Earth had crumbled under the weight of their superior technology. The world's finest soldiers, generals, and commanders had fought with every ounce of their being, but against the Zorathians, they were mere ants before a roaring fire. In the heart of Earth's shattered capital, once a symbol of human achievement, there was nothing left but ruins and fire. Towering skyscrapers, now nothing more than skeletal frames, stood as grim monuments to a civilization that had once been so full of life. The streets, once crowded with people, lay empty, save for the scattered remnants of humanity's final days. General Sarah Andros, the leader of the Earth Defense Coalition, stood atop the rubble of what had been a government command center, watching as the last of her soldiers fought valiantly against the oncoming wave of Zorathian war machines. She had seen Earth's defenses crumble, and now, with nothing left, she made a final decision. She activated a secure communication channel, one that could reach beyond Earth. The Zorathians had already disabled most human communication, but they hadn't expected Earth's most secure system. An old relic, built during the early years of the war, hidden from the aliens' sophisticated scanners. This was humanity's last message, and it had to be sent. To those who might hear this, if you are receiving this transmission, know that humanity's story is not over. We will not let our legacy be defined by defeat. Earth may burn, but we are not finished. We have learned. We will adapt, and we will strike. Her words were firm, despite the tears in her eyes. She knew this might be the last time anyone would hear the voice of a human commander. Yet in the depths of her heart, she could still feel the fire of hope. Hope that they weren't entirely alone in the universe. As the transmission broadcast into the void of space, a Zorathian cruiser loomed above her position, its weapons primed. She didn't flinch. The alien ship fired a blast that tore through the command center and erupted into a cataclysmic explosion. Sarah Andros was gone, but her message lived on, echoing in the cold expanse of space. The Zorathians, oblivious to the full weight of that final transmission, continued their occupation of Earth, believing humanity had been eradicated, their message nothing more than a final cry of desperation. But the aliens made a critical mistake. They had underestimated the human spirit. They had misread humanity's quiet withdrawal as a sign of surrender. But they were wrong. Across the galaxy, in the distant reaches of human-held colonies, people were listening. Some had survived, hidden, building, preparing. They knew they were not alone in this fight. The seeds of a revolution were quietly taking root. Humanity was still alive. And the day would come when they would make the Zorathians realize the true meaning of their final words. The Zorathian fleet departed Earth with little fanfare, confident in their victory. They had witnessed humanity's last defiant stand and crushed it with ease. To them, the humans were a minor species that had posed little more than a nuisance in the grand scheme of galactic conquest. Their empire, vast and powerful, had absorbed countless worlds and civilizations, but the annihilation of Earth was a triumph unlike any other. The Zorathians were certain they had extinguished the last flame of humanity's resistance. Back aboard the Zorathian command ship, Supreme Commander Rithak stood before the massive viewing screen, surveying the destruction left in the wake of the invasion. His elongated form and cold, the motionless eyes seemed to reflect the ruthlessness that had defined the Zorathian Empire. Humanity was weak, Rithak declared, his voice echoing throughout the bridge. Their final transmission was nothing but the desperate cry of a dying species. Let it be a lesson to any who would think to challenge us. The crew members around him nodded in agreement, their reptilian faces betraying no hint of doubt. For them, humanity was just another extinguished race, its name fading into the annals of galactic history. Yet, far from the Zorathian Empire, A ripple of unease began to form. Zorathian Commander Nthar, an experienced officer known for his strategic mind, lingered near the back of the command deck, his eyes fixed on a small anomaly blinking on his console. It was faint, barely noticeable, and yet it struck him as odd. A faint energy signature emanated from the edge of the solar system, near the wreckage of Earth. "Commander Nthar, is something troubling you?" one of his subordinates asked, noticing his distraction. Nthar turned to face the officer, his brow furrowing. "There is an energy signature near Earth. It shouldn't be there." The subordinate shrugged. "There is nothing left on that rock, Commander. It is a graveyard now. The human race is dead, nothing more than a distant memory." "I agree," Nthar replied slowly, "but I want to confirm it. Dispatch a probe, something inconspicuous. We may have missed something. We can't afford to let our guard down now." Rithek, overhearing the exchange, turned sharply. "What is this nonsense? Do not waste resources chasing ghosts. Humanity is gone. I've seen it with my own eyes. Earth is a dead planet." Nthar didn't argue, but the doubt lingered in his mind. He had learned long ago not to trust his empire's arrogance. The Zorathians had made mistakes before. Underestimating a species had always been their greatest flaw. Perhaps this time, they had underestimated humanity in the most dangerous way possible. While the Zorathians continued to expand their dominion, Nthar's probe was sent into the dark void surrounding Earth, where the faint energy pulse still persisted. Days passed, and Nthar's suspicion grew. The probe returned with startling information. The energy signature was not a natural anomaly. It was artificial. There was something out there, something human-made, hidden beneath the ashes of Earth. Back on the Zorathian flagship, Nthar presented his findings to Rithek. The Supreme Commander listened intently, his cold demeanor replaced by a flicker of intrigue. "Impossible," Rithek muttered under his breath as he analyzed the data. "If this is true, then humanity is not gone. But how? Perhaps they were not as defeated as we believed," Nthar said quietly. Rithek's eyes narrowed. "You dare question the superiority of our forces, Commander? Humanity was crushed, buried beneath the rubble. This is a foolish waste of time." But the seed of doubt had been planted. Despite Rithek's insistence, the Empire's high command began to question the finality of humanity's fall. Some of them began to whisper, what if humanity had merely been waiting, rebuilding, plotting their return? For the first time in years, the Zorathians felt a flicker of unease, but it was not enough to stir them into action. They dismissed the possibility of humanity's return, assuming that any remnant left on Earth was a disorganized and insignificant fragment. They had already won the war. But the truth was far more dangerous than they could ever have imagined. Humanity was not dead. It was simply preparing to strike. The Zorathians were blind to the truth, and that blindness would soon cost them more than they could fathom. As they expanded their empire, humanity's remnants had quietly gathered strength beneath their very noses. The Zorathians had dismissed the last message from Earth as nothing more than a symbolic farewell, a fleeting attempt to cling to hope. But those who survived Earth's fall were not simply hiding. They were preparing. Far beneath the surface of Earth, in vast subterranean bunkers, entire communities of humans had rebuilt themselves in secret. These survivors were not the weak, beaten remnants of the old world. They were the bold, the cunning, the resourceful. Over the years, they had turned their underground cities into thriving hubs of innovation, working tirelessly on technology that could rival the Zorathians' might. At the heart of it all was General Kal Renner, once thought dead, now the guiding force behind the resistance. After Earth's final stand, he had vanished into the shadows, taking with him the knowledge of humanity's greatest minds. He had built a secret network that reached across the globe, a collective of soldiers, scientists, engineers, and strategists united by a singular cause: reclaim Earth and punish the Zorathians for their arrogance. Kale stood in a vast underground command center, surrounded by holoscreens displaying tactical maps and blueprints of advanced technology. His eyes were intense, focused, as if every decision were the weight of an entire future. In the years since the Zorathian invasion, he had orchestrated humanity's greatest feats of ingenuity. The technology they were now developing was a hybrid, part organic, part technological, blending human biology with machines in ways the Zorathians had never encountered. The survivors of Earth had embraced not only the power of their minds, but the adaptability of their bodies. "We've grown beyond what they could imagine," Kale said, turning toward his second-in-command, Lieutenant Amara Cho. Her sharp eyes flickered with determination as she nodded. "We've perfected the hybridization process. Enhanced reflexes, neural interfaces, strength beyond human limits. We're ready," Amara replied. She was one of the first volunteers to undergo the genetic modifications and cybernetic enhancements, a living testament to what humanity had become. The humans weren't just adapting to survive. They were evolving to fight. Their new biotech soldiers could interface directly with advanced combat systems, making them capable of feats no ordinary human could match. Even the weapons they had developed were unlike anything the Zorathians had ever faced. The new human-made tech blended living organisms with machinery, creating a terrifying synergy. These were weapons that could think, feel, and adapt in real time, and humanity had mastered them. Kale looked over a hologram of Earth, his expression grave. "We've spent years rebuilding in the shadows. But it's time to emerge. It's time they understand we never gave up. We never stopped fighting. And now we have something they'll never expect." "Is it time to strike?" Amara asked, her voice low but full of anticipation. Kale nodded. "Yes, we hit them where it hurts." The first mission was already in motion. A small elite team, trained for stealth and precision, was preparing to infiltrate Zorathian space. Their target, a critical supply chain that sustained the Zorathian military's far-flung conquests. The humans had studied the Zorathian operations for years, learning their routines, their weaknesses, and their blind spots. This first strike would send a clear message that humanity was no longer a dying race. It was a force to be reckoned with. Amara's eyes glinted with pride. "They won't know what hit them." Kale turned back to the map. The time for waiting was over. Humanity's resurgence was no longer a distant dream. It was happening now, and the Zorathians would soon learn that they had underestimated the power of the human spirit. The rebellion that had seemed like nothing but a faint whisper in the void of space was now a roaring storm on the horizon. The Zorathians thought they had obliterated humanity, but they had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated the resilience of a species that refused to die. The first strike would mark the beginning of humanity's return, a return that would shake the very foundations of the galaxy. The first mission of humanity's resurgence was set in motion. The target, a vital Zorathian fleet supply line, a critical infrastructure point that provided the resources needed for their continued expansion. This mission would not only deal a devastating blow to their enemy, but also serve as a message that humanity had returned, and it was ready for war. The small team of elite soldiers, known as the Shadow Vanguards, had been handpicked by General Cal Renner himself. Each member had undergone extensive training and had been enhanced with the latest in human biotech modifications. They were faster, stronger, and more lethal than any soldier the Zorathians had ever encountered. They had a single objective: infiltrate Zorathian-controlled space, disable the supply line, and escape without being detected. The operation was to take place under the cover of darkness, utilizing the element of surprise as the Vanguards would travel aboard a stealth ship, one of the new human craft designed to slip past even the most sophisticated Zorathian sensors. Kale stood in the command center, watching as the Vanguards prepared for launch. His mind raced, knowing how crucial this mission was. If they succeeded, it would be a signal to the galaxy that humanity was no longer a forgotten race. If they failed, it could mean the end of any hope for the resistance. "We've studied their patrol routes, their communication patterns, and their defensive structures," said Amara Cho, now more than just Cal's second-in-command. She was the heart of their operations, as deadly and resourceful as Cal himself. This will be quick, clean, and will leave no trace of our involvement. Zorathians won't even know what hit them. Cale nodded, though he knew there was always a risk in such an audacious strike. The Zorathians had a way of detecting anomalies, even in their most secure zones. But this wasn't just about tactics, it was a statement. "Remember, we're not just hitting them," Cale said, his voice steady. "We're reminding them of what they've forgotten. Humanity is still here, and we're not just a relic of the past. We're their worst nightmare." The Shadow Vanguard's stealth ship slipped past Zorathian defense grids like a shadow in the dark, invisible to all but the most advanced detection systems. Their target was a massive Zorathian freighter, loaded with critical supplies for the war machine. As the ship approached, the team executed their first maneuver, a precise electromagnetic pulse, EMP, to disable the Zorathian freighter's shields, rendering it vulnerable. The freighter's crew, busy with routine operations, had no idea what was about to hit them. With eerie precision, the vanguards infiltrated the vessel, moving like ghosts through the darkened corridors. They encountered minimal resistance. The Zorathians, overconfident in their superiority, had underestimated the humans' ability to strike in the shadows. The leader of the vanguards, Captain Rhea Valen, planted a series of highly advanced explosives in key sections of the freighter, focusing on the critical supply compartments. The explosives were designed to cripple the Zorathian fleet's ability to continue their conquest of nearby systems, creating chaos that would ripple through the Empire. Once the charges were set, the team began their retreat. But something unexpected occurred. As the final charge was activated, one of the Zorathian crew members spotted an anomaly, an unfamiliar figure darting down a hallway. The crew member reached for an alarm, but before he could make a sound, Captain Valen silenced him with a swift strike. There was no time for mistakes. The team had to get out now. With the Zorathian security scrambling, the vanguards retreated into the depths of the freighter, using their stealth abilities to evade capture. The clock was ticking, and the explosives were primed to go off. 30 seconds. Amara's voice crackled over the comms. "Move faster. We've got less than 30 seconds before we're compromised." The vanguard split off into different paths, using their enhanced reflexes and agility to outpace their pursuers. They ran with a single focus: survival and mission completion. As they neared their extraction point, they heard the distant hum of Zorathian soldiers rushing to intercept them. Almost there. Cal's voice came through their earpieces, calm and reassuring. "This is where we prove we're not just survivors. We're a force." As they made their way to the extraction point, the entire freighter began to tremble. The charges had detonated. The Zorathian supply line was destroyed. A fireball of energy and debris lighting up the void of space. The Zorathian fleet would be crippled for weeks, maybe longer. The vanguards escaped in the nick of time, the stealth ship disappearing into the darkness of space before the Zorathians could even pinpoint their location. The message had been sent. Humanity was still alive. And now, the Zorathians would know that the fight was far from over. The Zorathians had been stunned by the attack on their supply line. For weeks, their fleets had been operating under the assumption that humanity had been vanquished, completely unaware of the growing force beneath their feet. The explosions that destroyed their freighter were just the beginning. And now they were forced to confront the reality that their victory over Earth was not as complete as they had believed. Back on the Zorathian flagship, Supreme Commander Rithak paced the command deck, a rare flicker of anxiety creeping into his otherwise stoic expression. The communications officer's voice rang out, urgent and sharp. "Commander, a fleet of ships has been spotted near the edge of our territory. They're using human-made technology. It's impossible. How could they have?" Rithak slammed his fist against the console. "I want answers. Now." His voice was cold, but his eyes burned with fury. The Zorathian Empire had prided itself on its invincibility, and this breach of their superiority could not be ignored. And Thar, the Zorathian commander who had insisted on investigating the strange signal from Earth's orbit, stood silently at the back of the command deck, watching the scene unfold. The fact that the humans had somehow escaped extinction was no longer just a theory. It was real, and the implications were far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. "Do you still believe humanity was fully eradicated, Commander?" Nenfar asked, his tone calm but filled with an undercurrent of unspoken tension. Rithak shot him a look of disdain. "This is irrelevant. The humans' last message was a pathetic cry for help. Their final stand was a futile effort to delay their inevitable extinction. What we're seeing now is either a desperate group of survivors or remnants of an ancient faction we missed." And Thar wasn't convinced. "Their technology. It's more advanced than anything we've encountered before. These ships are faster, more agile. If humanity has been rebuilding this entire time, their numbers may be growing. We should treat this as a threat, not a nuisance." Rithak clenched his jaw, clearly unwilling to entertain any suggestion that humanity could pose a serious threat. "We will send a fleet to neutralize this group, destroy their base of operations, whatever it is, and wipe them out. If they dare challenge the Zorathian Empire again, we will make them regret it." But as the Zorathians prepared their response, General Kel Renner and the human resistance were already one step ahead. The success of their first strike had bolstered their morale, but Kel knew it was just the beginning. The Zorathians would retaliate, and humanity needed to be ready. The mission now was to stay one step ahead, using their superior knowledge of the Zorathian tactics and their newly developed technologies to gain the upper hand. In the underground command center, Kel reviewed the data from their recent operation. The attack had crippled the Zorathian supply chain, but the retaliation would be swift and brutal. They needed to prepare for the inevitable counterattack. "We've hit them once," Kel said, his voice low but resolute. "Now we need to disappear before they come after us in full force. But we can't stop. The war has only just begun." Amara Cho, ever the strategist, tapped a series of holographic displays in front of her, her eyes scanning the data with intensity. "We'll need to move our operations. The Zorathians will expect us to stay in the underground bases, but we've set up decoy locations. They'll waste their time chasing shadows." Kel nodded, his mind already racing through the possibilities. "We'll use guerrilla tactics. Hit them where they least expect it, then vanish into the shadows before they can retaliate. And while they're distracted, we'll begin building our forces. We'll take back Earth, but we need to be patient." The resistance had begun to shift from a scattered collection of survivors to a well-coordinated and determined force. Humanity's greatest asset was its adaptability and resilience. Unlike the Zorathians, whose empire had grown stagnant with arrogance and overconfidence, humanity was built on innovation and survival. Every victory, every strike, made them stronger. "We need to send a message," Kel continued, his eyes hard with determination. "This war won't be won by fighting head-on battles. It will be won by making the Zorathians bleed, by forcing them to chase us across the galaxy. Let them waste their resources hunting down ghosts. Let them question their belief that they've crushed us." Amara's lips curled into a faint smile. "The Zorathians have never fought a war like this before. We will break them down, piece by piece." Across the galaxy, scattered pockets of humanity were gathering. The survivors, who had once been hopeless, now had a common purpose. They were fighting not just for their survival, but for the future of Earth. Their numbers were growing, and the Zorathians had no idea what they were about to face. The time for humanity to strike back had come. The Zorathians were about to learn that the human spirit could not be crushed so easily. The Zorathians had underestimated humanity's resilience, and now the galaxy was beginning to notice. The Resistance's series of covert strikes had forced the once mighty empire to divert vast resources to hunting down what they still dismissed as a scattered group of survivors. But the truth was becoming undeniable. Humanity was more than just a thorn in their side. It was a growing force that refused to die. For the first time, Zorathian commanders began to take the human threat seriously. Supreme Commander Rithak, still unwilling to admit the full extent of the danger, had ordered an all-out campaign to crush what little resistance remained. His confidence was faltering, though. Whispers among his officers spoke of growing tension in the ranks, and the latest reports confirmed something no one could ignore. The humans were coordinating across sectors, and their technology was evolving faster than expected. The war, which had once seemed so easily won, was now escalating beyond what Rithak had imagined. The Zorathians' might was beginning to waver. In a hidden command center beneath a jagged mountain range on a far-flung human colony, Cal Renner stood before a large holographic display, mapping out the next phase of their offensive. His expression was calm, but there was a fire in his eyes. He had expected the Zorathians to retaliate, but their overreaction had created an opportunity that humanity would exploit. "We have them on the run," Cal said, his voice low but filled with quiet intensity. "They're scrambling to defend their supply lines, their command centers, their fleets. Every time they think they have us, we vanish, and they have to start all over. It's costing them far more than they realize." Amara Cho, standing by his side, nodded. She had been the mastermind behind many of their covert operations, using her strategic genius to keep the resistance one step ahead of their enemies. It's more than just their resources. They are losing their morale. Their soldiers are getting frustrated, questioning whether this war is even worth it anymore. We're hitting them in ways they never expected. One of the tactical officers at the command table spoke up. "We've successfully liberated 4 colonies in the last month. Their defensive capabilities are crumbling, and we've managed to secure Zorathian technology. It's primitive, but it's useful." Cal's eyes narrowed as he looked over the map of their operations. "We need to use every advantage we've got. We've got their tech, we've got the element of surprise, and we've got the moral high ground. The Zorathians might think this war is about conquest, but we know it's about survival, and we're not going to stop until Earth is free." Meanwhile, across the galaxy, in the heart of the Zorathian fleet, Commander Enthar was wrestling with the consequences of Rithak's orders. Enthar, who had been one of the first to suggest caution, now realized the Empire was teetering on the edge of disaster. "We can't keep up this pace," Enthar said, addressing Rithak in a rare private moment. "The humans are too unpredictable. Every time we send our forces to one location, they strike somewhere else. We've diverted too much of our fleet, too many resources, and it's draining our ability to project power." Rithak, seething with frustration, dismissed the warning with a wave. "You're overthinking this, Commander. The humans are a nuisance, nothing more. We've crushed entire civilizations before. They will break." But Emthar wasn't convinced. He could see the cracks in the Zorathian Empire's once impenetrable armor. Every loss, every setback, was a sign that the humans were not the broken species they had assumed them to be. And though Rithak would not admit it, their strength was growing. The Resistance's latest offensive had been a massive success. A daring raid on a Zorathian research facility had led to the capture of crucial intelligence, the locations of several high-ranking Zorathian commanders, their fleet's weakest points, and most importantly, the plans for an advanced weapon that could decimate entire fleets with a single strike. This weapon, dubbed the Exactor, was humanity's ticket to turning the tide of the war. It was a weapon of mass destruction, capable of annihilating Zorathian warships in a matter of seconds, but it had a devastating flaw. It required enormous amounts of energy to function, making it virtually useless without a steady supply of power. Kale, however, saw an opportunity. He knew that if they could steal the energy resources required for the Exactor's operation, they could hold the Zorathians at bay long enough to build the weapon in full and strike at the heart of their fleet. "This is it," Kale said, determination in his voice. "We have to hit their power source. Without it, the Exactors are useless. We take that, and we cripple their ability to fight back. The war becomes ours." Amara nodded, her face set with grim resolve. They won't know what hit them. The plan was set into motion, and the humans prepared for the most dangerous strike of the war. They knew this attack could change everything, but it would come at a cost. The Zorathians would never let this one slip by, and they would retaliate with everything they had. But humanity had come this far, and they were ready to finish what they had started. The operation to steal the Zorathians' energy supply was nothing short of daring. The human resistance had gathered everything they needed: intelligence on the power source, a plan to infiltrate the heavily guarded facility, and a team that was ready to take the risk. This would be humanity's most critical strike yet, and it had to be flawless. General Cal Renner stood before his team, his face stern but resolute. The weight of this operation was not lost on him. If they succeeded, it would cripple the Zorathians' war efforts for months, maybe longer. But if they failed, it could mean the end of everything they had fought for. "We've got one chance," Cale began, his voice steady. "We hit them fast, we hit them hard, and we take their power. The exactor weapon is useless without energy. If we can destroy their power supply or seize it for ourselves, we can turn the tide of this war. Do not fail. We've come too far to lose it now." The Shadow Vanguards were ready. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the Zorathian power station, hidden within an asteroid belt, disable the security systems, and either steal or destroy the power cores that fueled the exactor weapons. The facility was the heart of the Zorathians' military might. Without it, their vast fleets would grind to a halt, and their most powerful weapons would be rendered useless. Cal's voice cut through the air as the team prepared to leave. "Amara, you're leading the infiltration. Take out their comms and disable their security grid. Rhea, I need you and your team to plant the explosives at the core. We'll have one shot at this. Make it count." Amara Cho gave a sharp nod, her expression unwavering. She had never been more ready for a mission. Every step she took, every move she made, was calculated. The Zorathians may have had superior technology, but humanity had learned to fight smarter, not harder. The stealth ship carrying the vanguards glided silently through the asteroid field, avoiding detection by Zorathian sensors. Every moment felt like a lifetime as they approached the heart of the power station. The Zorathians were unaware of their approach, their complacency once again their downfall. Inside the power station, hundreds of Zorathian soldiers were stationed, guarding the massive energy cores that powered the exactor weapons. The team knew they had to act quickly. The longer they stayed, the greater the chance of discovery. Entering the facility in 5, Amara whispered into her comms, her breath steady. "Stay sharp. We have one shot." With the flick of a switch, the stealth ship docked. The vanguards disembarked and immediately got to work. Amara moved first, quickly disabling the outer security grid with a series of well-placed hacks. As the lights flickered and the alarms went silent, the team pushed forward, their movements swift and fluid. Rhea's team split off to plant explosives at the power cores. The station's structure was massive, a labyrinth of steel and energy conduits. The Zorathian soldiers had no idea what was about to hit them. A few silent strikes incapacitated the guards, leaving only the faintest echoes in the cold corridors. The resistance team was a shadow, unstoppable and silent. But as they approached the main power chamber, something went wrong. The Zorathian commander stationed at the power core, Corthan, was not as oblivious as they had hoped. A faint blip on his terminal caught his eye, and a deep sense of unease settled over him. He had been tracking the unusual fluctuations in their security grid for days, but he had assumed it was a routine glitch. Now, it was clear. They were not alone. "Alert the guards." Corthan's voice was cold as he activated the facility's defense systems. "We've got intruders." Before the team could react, the walls around them lit up with floodlights, and Zorathian soldiers poured into the chamber from every direction. Amara's mind raced. They had to finish the job. There was no turning back. "Rhea, plant the explosives now," Amara ordered. "We're going loud." A fierce firefight broke out as the humans fought tooth and nail to keep the Zorathians at bay. The vanguards had the advantage of superior tactics and enhanced reflexes, but the Zorathians were overwhelming in numbers and firepower. Blasts of energy filled the air, and the sound of gunfire echoed through the power station. Amara darted through the chaos, narrowly avoiding Zorathian blasts, and reached the control center. She hacked into the facility's mainframe, initiating the detonation sequence for the explosives. 15 seconds, she shouted over the comms, her voice sharp with urgency. The resistance team continued to push back the Zorathian soldiers, buying Amara the precious seconds she needed. With a final keystroke, the explosives were armed. "Everyone, out," Rhea yelled, pulling back as the countdown reached its final seconds. The vanguard sprinted toward the exit, narrowly avoiding a blast that rocked the station's walls. Behind them, the power station began to crumble, the energy cores detonating in a spectacular explosion. The shockwave was enough to send the Zorathians scattering, their entire fleet temporarily crippled. As the team escaped through the stealth ship, Kel's voice echoed through the comms. "The power source is gone. The exactor weapons are useless. We've won this round." But even as they disappeared into the darkness of space, Kale knew this was just one victory in a long war. The Zorathians would retaliate, but humanity had shown them that they were no longer the easy prey they had once been. The tide was turning. Humanity had struck at the heart of the Empire. Now it was their turn to rise. The aftermath of the assault on the Zorathian power station rippled across the galaxy like a shockwave. The explosion had been a success, but it had come at a cost. The human resistance had lost several key members, and the Zorathians were not ones to forgive easily. Their retaliation would be swift, brutal, and unforgiving. However, the damage done to the Zorathian war machine had been catastrophic. The exactor weapon, a game-changer for the Zorathians, was now useless, and their fleets were left vulnerable, with many of their most powerful ships rendered immobile. General Cal Renner knew this was their opportunity to finish what they had started. The war was no longer a distant dream. It was tangible, and victory was within their grasp. The Zorathians, despite their size and technological superiority, were beginning to crumble under the pressure of humanity's ingenuity and relentless strikes. Sitting in the command center aboard the Vanguard, Kale scanned the holographic map of the galaxy. Their forces had been growing stronger, and they had made alliances with other species oppressed under the Zorathian Empire. The idea of unity that humanity had sparked was now a powerful force, a coalition of the oppressed, bound together by their shared desire to overthrow the tyrannical empire. "We've got them on the ropes," Kale said to Amara Cho, who stood beside him, her face tired but resolute. "We need to strike at their capital. This is the only way to ensure they can't recover. We take their homeworld, and we end this war." Amara nodded, her sharp eyes focused on the data. "The Zorathian capital is heavily fortified, but it's not invincible. We know the weakness, their core command center. We've studied the blueprints. If we can infiltrate their defenses, we can destroy their command network, leaving them blind and disoriented." "We can't afford to hesitate," Kale replied. "Every minute we wait gives them time to regroup. We need to hit them hard and fast. This mission will break them." Across the galaxy, the remaining Zorathian commanders were scrambling to organize a defense. Supreme Commander Rithak, still reeling from the loss of the exactor weapon and the crippling damage to their fleets, was furious. He had underestimated humanity's resilience, and now the Empire was on the brink of collapse. The Resistance had done what no one thought possible. They had turned the tide of the war. It was no longer a battle for survival. It was a battle for the future of the galaxy. The Zorathians had brought humanity to the edge of extinction, but now the humans were coming for them, with vengeance and determination in their hearts. Rithak called an emergency meeting with his generals, desperation creeping into his voice. "We've lost the exactor. Our fleets are scattered. But we are not defeated. We will fight until the last ship falls. We will crush these rebels, no matter the cost." But even Rithak knew the truth. His forces were fractured, morale was plummeting, and humanity's relentless assault was only gaining momentum. The Empire was no longer the unstoppable force it had once been. As the Resistance fleet gathered outside the Zorathian capital, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. The final battle was about to begin, and every soldier aboard the human ships knew that this would be the moment that determined the galaxy's future. Kale stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, looking out at the looming planet. The Zorathian capital loomed ahead, its towering spires casting long shadows across the surface. He could feel the weight of the moment. This was not just about defeating an enemy. It was about the future of humanity, the future of every species oppressed by the Zorathians. "This is it," Kale said, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "We end this tonight. For Earth, for every world that suffered under their rule. This is our fight." Amara placed a hand on his shoulder. "We're with you, Kale. All the way." The Resistance fleet moved into position, their ships moving in perfect coordination, silently preparing for the final assault. The Zorathian defense grid was formidable, but the human fleet had learned from every battle, every skirmish. They had prepared for this moment. The enemy would not see them coming. The first wave of human ships fired their weapons, sending a barrage of missiles toward the Zorathian capital's defense shields. The shields flickered, holding for a moment, but they were no match for the human fleet's superior firepower. The Zorathian defenses began to crumble, and the Resistance surged forward, breaking through their lines with precision. The battle was fierce. Zorathian warships retaliated, launching counterattacks and desperate maneuvers to protect their homeworld. But humanity had the upper hand. They were fighting for survival, for the chance to take back what had been stolen from them. As the battle raged in space, a small team of human soldiers, led by Kel himself, infiltrated the heart of the Zorathian capital. They fought their way through the towering citadels, taking down Zorathian soldiers in a series of brutal confrontations. The mission was clear: reach the core command center and destroy it, ending the war once and for all. Kel's heart raced as they neared their objective. The Zorathian defenses were growing more desperate, but he could see the finish line. The Zorathians had underestimated humanity's will to fight, and now they were about to pay the price. With a final powerful strike, Kale and his team breached the command center, planting the final explosives that would ensure the Zorathian Empire's collapse. As the countdown began, Kale stood for a moment, watching the planet below. Earth was avenged. The galaxy would be free. The explosion that followed was nothing short of catastrophic, sending shockwaves throughout the Zorathian capital. The empire that had once seemed invincible was no more. The Resistance had won. Humanity had struck back, and this time they would never be forgotten.